a pretty big holiday, a pretty big patriotic holiday in the United States. So, we are going to talk a bit about that holiday, but also about Independence Day in other countries. What this sort of understanding of Independence Day is, what sort of notions of patriotism and or nationalism are involved in the celebration of that sort of thing, and what it basically means to build a holiday for a country, for a nation. So, like I said, today is the 4th of July, and this is a huge holiday in the US. People are wearing red, white, and blue. They're off of work. They're having barbecues, usually eating hot dogs, maybe hamburgers, maybe making a 4th of July cake with strawberries and blueberries, anything that's red, white, and blue and festive. And it's a big opportunity for people to get together with their friends, their family, watch fireworks in the evening when it gets dark, and basically celebrate freedom. Again, this brings into questions, bigger questions. What does freedom mean? What does American freedom mean? How does America share freedom or take freedom away from other countries in the world? These are all questions that I think we're going to have a very interesting time discussing today. So, you guys, let's start with the first question. Why do you think that countries celebrate their Independence Day? Why do you think people celebrate Independence Day? Let's start with you, Denise.
Because usually uh, time where independence was obtained in history, it was our first step of country, or even really creation this country as a country. Because previously, before Independence Act signed, yes, United States was a set of British colonies only, and it was in a bylaw of Britain. So appearing United States as a country is after independence war, and partially it was initialized by signing of Independence Act itself.
Right.
So
Okay, Denise. So you're going back to 1776 when this Declaration of Independence was signed, and going until 1781 when that war ended, and then 1783 when the nation was officially established and what have you. But why is it then, do you think, people are still so interested in celebrating such an old holiday today? I mean, did you watch the video? I'm curious. Did you watch that video that I sent you?
now I think it's more like a tradition. It's very similar to 1st of May in Russian, because previously in Soviet time, 1st of May was a like a religious meaning holiday. But after converting part of USSR to Russian, there is no real meaning or historical meaning for 1st of May officially. But there is a very important tradition for much people to have a holiday to, it's usually a springtime with good weather, and the first time for doing something on nature out of city. So it's a part of tradition. It's important to people, but for some people it have no any real historical meaning. But for some people, yes, because attributics in color of United States banner, it's also rather patriotic thing.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's some mix of tradition, of patriotism, of touching history for some people.
All right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. What do you think, Elia? Why do you think that people celebrate Independence Day?
So people celebrate Independence Day because it is officially done by the government, and it is the policy of being patriotic, I think, and that's why they try to participate in all ways to celebrate this holiday. And because I think that when these some history events were, I don't know, 100, 200, 300 years ago, of course they lose their importance perhaps. But for America, this very Independence Day, it was something like the end of the war. So it's maybe not the same, of course, but very close to our Victory Day, perhaps. So that's why they celebrate it. But as
Okay.
far as
Yeah.
it was very far ago, so they don't pay so much, I don't know, meaningful to that celebration.
Okay, that's a very good point you bring up. I mean, you mentioned Victory Day in Russia or the Soviet Union, and you mentioned the end of a war and the celebration that it comes with that. I think we're going to talk a bit more about that too when it comes to, how you establish a holiday and what have you. But yeah, I mean, that's a very good thing. When you have a date, when you have some sort of thing to go on. It really does. And it's something that people remember, and it's something that you can maybe then push. Because if you look, for example, at Victory Day in Russia, I mean, how many people who were there celebrating were actually there on May 9th, 1945? It's a shrinking number of people every year. But at the same time, what do you see? You see this holiday that has remained as a very important defining characteristic of Russian identity. Why? Because of the history involved in it, because of what it means for the sort of identity of a nation, of a people, which is a very interesting point to make, a very, very relevant point to make, especially when you take into consideration this American Independence Day. Ellie, did you watch that video?
Yes, but I have watched the first part of the video.
Okay, so you see this guy is out and he's asking people questions about, this holiday that almost every American celebrates, and people don't know the basic facts of what day or what year or what to do. I mean, these are things that have maybe been lost over time, and I think you can use a big comparison to what Victory Day in Russia is, because here you can ask children, maybe even children in kindergarten, and they will tell you it's about about defending your home. And you even have these songs that small children are singing in schools, and it's a very different sort of thing. Whereas maybe in America it's become so common that people don't have that same sort of need to promote it. So I think it's a very interesting contrast in this sort of national holiday.
I
All right,
think
what? Yeah.
in America, idea of independence is more about, to my mind, philosophical idea, and there was many significant ideas put in part of constitution in Act of Independence, but it's not close and well understood by most of people.
Right.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a rather it's very thin thing, and for most people, it's independence. It's not meaningful word because in its life there is no problematic which link it to independence. But in Russia, idea of victory in somewhere is very important for most people. Because if you have a not high level of life, if you have a conflict with many countries abroad, the people needing some which will help them to feel strong, and some abstract national victory is a very good plot of such idea. So, and it's a historical fact that a few years after World War II, Victory Day in Russia.
World War II. World War II.
Yes, World War
Yeah.
II. Yes, there is no celebration in Russia in 9th of May. There is no military parade and so on. And only after a few years, and it was a political act to recover this holiday.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that's that thing. It's how you,
And
yeah,
in
it's yeah.
US, is trying to keep some very old ideas, and these ideas is not close to many people. But Victory Day in Russia, it's some revoked holiday,
Reworked holiday. Yeah,
revoked celebration. Yes, and
right.
it's work on different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thing. Very interesting thing. I mean, because it's not just about a day. It's not just about the celebration itself. It's about those words, those notions, those understandings that you were talking about, like freedom or independence versus victory. I mean, they're different sort of definitions, right? I mean, victory is something that's
Yes.
pretty much clear cut, whereas independence, all right, maybe if you take it like Elia was saying, the end of the war, that end of the Revolutionary War, then yeah, maybe it's a defined sort of thing. But freedom, which is very much what it is billed at as being a celebration of nowadays, freedom is not such a clearly defined concept. I mean, there are many different definitions of freedom. There are many people who would say that America is not free. There are other people who would say that it's the most free country in the world. Again, it's how you define something, and it's such a difficult thing to define. All right, so what do you personally know about any American traditions around the 4th of July? Eddie, do you know anything about what Americans do on the 4th of July?
You said already that they're going to have barbecues, um, cook different tasty cakes with the blueberry, and just come.
I'm not sure how popular that is. I think it's more of a new thing, just trying to be creative and artsy and crafty. But yeah, you can usually find nice cakes, potato salads, and things like that.
And I think it is just the day to communicate the same, yeah, really the same, maybe not just the same, but very close to that May Day holidays in Russia, because we celebrate them together. First and second May, the Labor Day, and then comes very close the Victory Day, 9th of May, and we also go to some nature, countryside, make barbecues and just communicate with uh, neighbors, friends, relatives, and at the end, usually people like to have fireworks.
Yes, yes, very much so. Denise, what about you? Is there any sort of American Independence Day, 4th of July celebration tradition you can think of, maybe from movies or something like that? Because it's a very common theme. I think any movie, any good American movie that takes place in summer or has something that going on in summer, there's going to be the 4th of July kind of incorporated into that, isn't there? What do you think, Denise? Anything you can think of?
Mm, hmm. Uh, Interesting thing that in United States there are less official holidays than in Russia. So to my mind, some idea of holiday, some additional day, probably in the middle of week sometimes, it's attract attention of people to do something in the days. So yes, there is very simple thing to link somewhere in film or in book or to this date. A good
Right.
point.
Right. Well, it comes to my mind just thinking about it. I'd forgotten about it when I was putting this together, but remember the movie Independence Day, right?
Yes.
Right? America saves the world from alien invaders, guys. Remember
And
this?
also keep independence again.
Yes, yes. You see, so again, what is this independence, this freedom, this sort of, I don't know, defending? I think that's another thing that, if you think about the 9th of May celebrations too, you get that sort of like defending the fatherland sort of thing. And I think that in the US, you'll maybe get on the 4th of July those feelings of defending defending that freedom, defending that way of life. What exactly that is, I don't know. Is it barbecues? Is it fireworks? Is it something else? I don't know how much of that people think about, but I think that psychologically there is that sort of built-in defense and patriotism that comes around with that. So it's a really interesting thing. This is a very psychological discussion we're having, I think. All right, what about, we've already been talking about these analogies in Russia. We all kind of came up with the Victory Day, which I think is interesting. Also that 1st of May, which is
I think Victory Day is a more militaristic day. It's more about army, about victory, about people who died on the war.
Right.
It's less
remembrance of this sort of thing.
I think Independence Day is more positive, and it's about some positive thing, about some more about life.
It is. But it all is, because I think it's a very interesting point you make. I mean, you make that militaristic definition, and there definitely is that presence when it comes to Victory Day. But especially in the last, 5 years or so, I would say, in Russia, where you really get people, that are there, that are celebrating and thanking the contributions of their parents or grandparents or even great grandparents for whatever they did in the war, for surviving that war, for, living and continuing that life after. And I think that you really have seen the 9th of May become a very important modern Russian holiday too, in terms of understanding, what sort of sacrifices were made, but also what sort of present there is. And I think that, it's a very powerful thing, when you see people who are either it's on social media, people are posting pictures of people who are out there marching with pictures of their loved ones, who were either veterans or what have you. I think it's a very, it's a very new redefinition of this holiday. But let's talk about, okay, you guys, we've been talking about Victory Day, which is definitely a great example of that sort of patriotism. I think it is a very patriotic holiday.
For people, the most close in Russia, I think, yes, it's the 1st of May.
Okay.
Because it's some more social holiday, and it's more about communication. Even in Soviet times, there was a demonstration, and most people go to demonstration to communicate with others, to meet with friends sometime.
Right. Okay.
So yes.
I was gonna. Elliot get into this too. But I was thinking too about, all right, we're talking about this, but what about this so-called Russia Day? Guys, what do you think about Russia Day or Constitution Day or the Day of National Unity? I mean, what are your feelings about these holidays? Do you think that those are really patriotic occasions? Elliot, what do you think? When is Russia Day? That's a good question. I always get it confused. I always think it's June 6th, which is like Pushkin's birthday, so that's not it. But it's June 12th. So what do you think about Russia Day?
Yes, Pushkin, as far as I remember, June the 6th, and Independence Day in Russia, the 12th of June. And
is it Independence Day?
No,
it's not. You see, it's not. It's not.
So what is it then? Sorry.
It's Russia Day. It's День России, it's Russia Day.
Okay. So what about Independence Day? Is it
there
in
is
December?
Like Denise was saying last time, independence from what?
So is it in December? Sorry.
No, what's in December? There used to be the Constitution Day, but now it used to be Constitution Day in December, but now it's National Unity Day in November.
Okay.
Yes. And
so
November.
What about Independence Day then?
There is no independence from whom? Independence from whom?
I thought that June the 12th is Independence Day.
No, it's Russia Day.
Is it the same or no?
No, it's not. It's not.
It's a day where Russian was appeared not as a part of Soviet Union, but as some separate country.
Yes.
but for most people, there is a very small difference between the Soviet Union and Russia. So,
Oh gosh, you guys, it's such a
and
debatable thing. But that's I think the thing. This is a very important point. Our discussion on this, our back and forth, our ping pong is, hey, is it or isn't it? Again, it's one of those things that yes, this is a day in history, right? This is the day when okay, that declaration of the what do you call it? This state sovereignty of the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic was established, and of course set the groundwork for, uh, it's just it's so I don't know what to say, guys, because it's a historical day. Yes, it is, but it's not celebrate. I mean, what do you guys? It's a day off, but like, is it really celebrated as some sort of huge
problem that is not historical day itself, because if nothing new appears after, because all government of Soviet Union become a government of Russian. All science institutes of Soviet Union, central institutes, become institutes of Russia. So nothing appears. There was some symbolic act that from current day, new country, Russian appears instead of part of, I can't remember, it's RSFSR.
right.
It was a part of USSR, but now it's not part, it's an independent country.
Okay, so you see, but that's a different point. You see, that is a very important point, because it's not really independence as such. It's like the opposite of independence, right? It's like the sort of how do you say it? Like maybe getting rid of the burden. I don't even know how to say it, because like by taking all those things on, by no longer being responsible for other things, by inheriting all of those other structures, the army and what have you, but not having those other Soviet socialist republics that are under that same government. So it's not really independence. It's something else. It's like that. It's maybe, I don't know, like what do you call it? What would you call that? It's a very, different sort of concept.
Yes. And signing of such art is not about, appearing something new. So it's only some putting in document thing that really exists, that really happens.
Right. Yeah. Well, Elliot, okay, so do you understand what we're talking about here? Do you want to add anything to this? It's like a cultural discussion here.
Yes, I'm listening to you very carefully, and I think I would call this I don't know, freedom from responsibility, something like that.
Yes.
Freedom
You see,
from
and that
responsibility. And actually, I just Googled that Independence Day in Russia, and Google said that it is the 12th of June, and wrote the day of Russia and Independence Day through comma.
Okay. All right. That's Google. I don't believe everything I see on Google. You guys.
So,
but I'm curious, Elia, because you were born in Uzbekistan, right?
yes.
Yeah?
I was, and I know that from the deep of my skin, all that situations, all that troubles, all that problems that caused perestroika, and that
Yes.
all things connected with that losing losing of responsibility, losing of everything. I don't know, the influence, maybe it's
influence is a very good word. Influence, responsibility, that sort of glue, maybe the glue keeping everything together, right? This was some sort of anti-adhesive that was done. And yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting because, I mean, you've lived through that personally, Elia. I mean, it's a huge change.
Yes, huge change, and really tragedy for many families, really. For lots of people, it is very close to not war, of course, but in some parts of they were local wars.
Oh
too.
yes, of course.
and I don't know, losers day I would call it, really, because really the empire fell down and lost everything and declared its I don't know, weakness.
Yes. Yes. Very, very much so. Very much so. It's such an interesting thing. It is because again, we're talking about history, we're talking about politics, we're talking about identity, we're talking about so many different things here that are, well, I mean, relevant because we have lived through this history, and it's something that we're still kind of trying to understand. I mean, how many years after? What about in Uzbekistan? Do they have an Independence Day there, Elia?
Yes, they have certainly their local Independence Day, but I'm not. I don't know about it because we moved a little bit earlier
Okay.
because I had even that USSR documents.
Oh, I see.
So it
Okay.
was USSR in how is it called, in documentary
Your
documentary.
documents,
Yes.
okay, you had Soviet documents. Okay.
Yes, Soviet documents, and I think we caught the last train to move to Russia
Okay.
because it
Okay.
was also very difficult. But I would tell you that for Russian people, I think it was a very good decision because for that weak empire, it was really very difficult to hold all that colonies
Yes.
and to pay for the colonies, because usually the empires somehow make colonies work for the center. But in ex-USSR, the situation was so that life in Moscow was of rather high level, and life in capitals of the republics or so-called colonies. And if to consider the situation in small Russian countries, it was really very poor. Uh, um, there were no products, there were no apartments to live. There was nothing. So I think for Russia it was a very good, maybe clever decision to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely history. We've definitely seen a lot of things change in the world because of it. But anyway, so that's another discussion. I think that's another discussion in and of itself. But let's get back to this whole sort of I guess these holidays and what have you. We already talked about that. What do you think is? We talked about this briefly about the whole sort of war thing. But what do you think is the most effective way to create a new holiday in a country? Elliot, what do you think is the most effective way to create a new holiday in a country?
Just to connect it with some certain event, and to involve some certain traditions. So I think any holiday should include these two main features.
Okay. What do you think, Denise?
Uh, I think there is for me it's simple to extract two ways. First, it's simply legalize existing tradition. It's like about we have International Women's Day in 8th of March, but also there was some kind of tradition um, celebrating men in the 23 of February, Day of Russian Army. And there is a long time, there is not holiday, there is only some celebration for army men, but 2 or 3 last years it's official holiday. And all people percept appearing of this as official holiday rather smoothly, and there was existed tradition, so holiday appears by a simple way. And another way is that it's more about changing identity probably, or trying to correct some perception of traditions, of idea of country and so on. It's trying to find some idea which is which be important and meaningful for people. For example, there is no one holiday in Russia which perceived as a some celebration about a country. We have a day of Russia, we have like Constitution Day, but for most people it's not meaningful. It's simple. It's like a weekend. And trying to find some idea which will perceived by people, which will be a real point probably of celebration, or should be important. It can it's a way to create a new important holiday.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. These are.
But I'm not sure it's possible on current time. It's a very hard thing.
We'll see. We'll see. It is a very hard thing. It is a very hard thing to make that sort of new national identity holiday, whatever have you. But yeah, you've got to have some sort of thing that I think is universally understood, accepted, reaches out to the whole population. I mean, these are the sort of things that are very important too. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's interesting to discuss.
Oh, another very interesting idea. One of the problems why it's hard to find such idea or such a day, because if there is very big country, there are very big count of small local traditions, and it's hard to find a way how to glue them all. So another way is direction of create more splitted, more federalized country, where some low-level traditions can appear in different places, by its own way.
Interesting. Yeah, true. More of a local sort of holiday, what have you. All right, next question. What do you think is the difference between patriotism and nationalism? Denise, what do you think is the difference between patriotism and nationalism?
It's in definition, of course. Patriotism is more about feel linked to a country, to some probably territory or some country as idea. And nationalism is about splitting and linking to some people by national property. And also, usually by all ideas appeared by as a part of nationalism, national problematic. It's usually very I don't know how to very sensitive to people, but not all time have some real basement.
Basis.
Basis or basement, I don't know, or basis, okay.
All right, okay.
So it's a very simple solution that problem is in somewhere, not in me, but in some people, and these people also live around, and if we move it away, problem will disappear. But why?
True.
And patriotism is a more abstract probably in something, and it's more but patriotism usually is very useful for government.
This is true. Yeah, this is very true. Very useful for a government and what have you. Yeah.
Another backside of medal.
Yeah. Elia, what do you think? What do you think is the major difference between patriotism and nationalism?
I think that there is a very thin border between these two things, where it is patriotism and where it is nationalism. Sometimes it is difficult to decide because when you live in one country and you're a native citizen, and the whole atmosphere and the whole events you take, you participate, are like patriotism, and for the foreigners, it looks like nationalism. So it is sometimes it is common situation. But fortunately, I think that last years it is very popular to globalize, but there is also mm, different opinions, mm, different meanings of that. So there are who support that movement and who is against that. But certainly there is some globalization. I don't know how to say it, stream tendency. Very, it is very uh, we can see it very good looking to the Europe when they are globalized in the Euro Union. Yeah, what is it in English?
European Union.
European Union, yes.
Yes.
And I think that is a future tendency, and to my mind, it will be our future, because I think that the whole world in future will be like one country, because of information and things connected with that. So I think that there will be no such strict borders like today's between the countries.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing. Definitely, definitely. And when I think about patriotism, my initial feeling is that it is a good thing. When I hear nationalism, my initial reaction is that it is a bad thing. And I think, like we were talking about, it's a matter of what exactly this all entails. And then, like you were saying with nationalism, I mean, maybe if it's something, or when it's something like it's against some person, or some person is the reason for those problems, those are things that are very negative in connotation. Whereas with patriotism, you often will get that sort of, I just love my country. Here's my flag. Let me wave it. I'm proud. But as you were saying, there's a very fine line between where those definitions, where those concepts diverge, meet, intertwine. Those are the sort of things. And very often you'll get people who claim to be patriots who are actually very much nationalistic, and who, while saying they love their country, will then have a certain problem with a particular ethnic group, or maybe foreigners in their country. And then it turns into this nationalism, where it's, I don't know, it can get very dangerous, and it can get very questionable in terms of how people are displaying that so-called patriotism. And nationalism, on the other hand, can also be a good thing. It can also be a patriotic, somewhere between patriotic and Adriatic. Patriotic thing, because you can be proud of your national identity, which may or may not include statehood. That's another sort of interesting thing. I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but I'm sure that in your passports, what do you have under nationality?
As I remember, there is no such point in modern passports.
But in your old passports, you had yeah.
I have no passports in before Russian time.
Okay. Well, before you had nationality.
Yes.
And yeah. And so you would have, like, okay, Russian or Uzbek, Ukrainian, these sort of things were all in people's passports. Now, interestingly, in the American passport, there is a blank for nationality. Only it's not a blank that anyone can choose, can get to fill out. It's automatically, by default, written as United States of America, which means it's not really nationality that they're talking about in that passport, since no one gets to choose their nationality. What that so-called nationality actually is citizenship. You see? But citizenship and nationality, are they the same thing or not? You know, I think that also gets into a lot of new questions as to how we define ourselves, as to how we identify ourselves ethnically, nationally, versus how we identify ourselves as citizens of any given country. So these are all very interesting questions that I think, you know, we'll have the opportunity to discuss at further length and maybe other topics. But it is a sort of there are so many questions that come from questions. It's such a psychological topic to talk about. All right, next question. Philadelphia, that's in Pennsylvania, that is considered to be the birthplace of the United States of America. It's where you can find Independence Hall. That's where they signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. It's, you know, a historical place, and it's billed as the birthplace of America. All right, you guys, trivia question, psychological question, history question. What is the birthplace of Russia? Elia, let's start with you. Remember, there is really no right or wrong answer on this. It's what you think, and let's discuss a bit.
I think that certainly the birthplace of Russia is Moscow, I think. Because if we remember that very, how is it called in English? Смутные времена, so they were
time of troubles. The time of troubles.
Time
yes.
of trouble for I'm not sure that I'm right, because I'm not very strong in history, but it was about 100 years as far as I remember, or 10 years. I don't know, 10 or 100. So I don't remember, but I remember that the times were very difficult for Russia, and I think that Moscow gave birth to Russia.
Okay. All right. That's a very good point. Now, Denise, what is your answer?
I agree with Elia. Yes, to my mind, it's also Moscow, but my history placed it a little bit earlier. To my feeling, history of Russia before Mongol War was very similar to history of Europe. There was also numerous of small semi-countries, semi-cities, and there was many war between different cities, noblemen, and so on. But after invading of Mongol, history was changed, and to war with such strong to create some alternative empire, to union all of forces, to union of all the small towns, to preserve some territories, and the point of such union became Moscow, because Moscow was a small village, but it was placed in the middle of big forest region, and that was hard to continue invading on a forest territory for Mongols. So Moscow was the first place around of this place start appearing the country which became a Russian Empire in after that, in many years after that.
Right.
So yes, it's Moscow.
Yeah, okay. You guys are both saying Moscow. Now, you guys, I learned, all right, back in history class, Russian history class, I learned that the birthplace of Russia is Kiev. You know, going back to Kiev and Rus, right? And then further, because I mean, this is, you know, this sort of gathering of these tribes coming together of people. Of course, it's a very sensitive topic nowadays, especially in Ukraine. They don't like to hear that, right? As Kiev being the birthplace of Russia. Although, if you look at the history, this is where the people came together. Moving along in those chronicles, we then moved to, well, you also have Novgorod, you know, Veliki Novgorod there in outside of St. Petersburg as this maybe possible birthplace of this Russian statehood. Then, of course, you've got Moscow, which you both mentioned. You've got St. Petersburg, which, you know, when Peter the Great moved everything up there, you know, how that changed Russia too. You were mentioning about that whole sort of European analogy, Denise, and everything else. I mean, there is so much. It depends on what exactly we want to define as the birth of Russia, because there have been so many births of Russia, right? Whether it's the coming together of people, whether it's moving to this new land, whether it's creating some sort of empire, or, you know, as you were saying, whether it's modernizing, whether it's post-modernizing. You know, these are all different questions that we have to ask. I think that probably the most significant city for Russia, modern Russia, I mean, and just throughout much of the history, Moscow has always been such an important figure, right? Whether the capital is being moved away from there, being moved back, or being moved to there, being moved away from there, being moved back there. You know, these are all such important decisions. And of course, if you look at the city proper, you can see how, whether or not you want to consider it to be the birthplace, which I think we all do, it's still the life force. Does that make sense? It's still where all the life is coming from, and it's being spread throughout the country because of the logistics of how everything works. So I think it's you know, a very interesting point. I'm gonna agree with you guys and say yes. We'll go with Moscow. We'll go Moscow as its birthplace. All right. Next question. Let's see. We have time for two more. I think. I like this one. I don't know the 1776 when I do that. But the best way, what do you think is the best way to work when a day off occurs on a Wednesday? Guys, okay, let's think. Denise, what do you think? What is the best way to work if the day off is on a Wednesday?
I have a two-part of answer. To my mind is I'm working from home last time, so to me it's hard to split sometimes weekend from weekdays. So it's a simple put a holiday in the middle of the week. It's no problem. It's a good day to go from a city, for example, to a long walk on night nature, or to visit some interesting museums or so on. But for our government, it's usually the better idea to move a part of New Year holiday, to glue the holiday in the middle of week to some of nearest weekend.
Yes. Okay. That's a good idea. I like, but yeah, if you work from home, I guess things are a bit different. What about you, Elia? What do you think is the best way to work when a day off? Well, you're a teacher, so you don't work during the summer, but if a day off is on a Wednesday, what's the best way to work?
You know, for me, anytime when it is day off, it is great. So it doesn't matter whether it is in the middle of the week or at the end of the week. But I don't like really that very movements. So if there is some possibility, and if it is only one day, why not in the middle of the week? It is also a good idea. It's another point when you've got small vacations and you have some possibility to have a small trip. So it is another point. But one day in the middle or at the end of the week, I think it doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay. It's a kind of strange thing for Americans, I think, because usually holidays are going to be observed on a Monday. So it's always like the Monday that's off, but the exception is the 4th of July or Christmas or New Year's. Those are, days that are fixed that you can't flex around. And I guess when it's on a Wednesday, people really don't know what to do because it's kind of weird. Do they take a couple of extra days off? Do they call in sick? If you call in sick, you're probably going to get in trouble because really, are you sick? There are all these different things that go around it. But it's one of those. You guys remember when? Well, they do that. When in Russia they make Saturdays working Saturdays. To compensate for some other day you got off during the week, or to extend the holiday that way. I think, wasn't there a working Sunday one year? I mean, like, there are all these different kind of playing around with calendars. You can't do that in the US. Like, you can't make people come to work on a Saturday or a Sunday because they have maybe religious obligations, and it's very much frowned upon. But anyway, it's kind of interesting that people have been discussing this in the US this time around because, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? The 4th of July is on a Wednesday. We have to go to work. Or, anyway, it's one of those things. All right, next question is, what do you think is the most important thing to reflect upon when observing a national holiday? Elia, let's start with you. What do you think is the most important thing?
I am not sure that I have understood properly the question.
Well, for example, if we have this American Independence Day, or if we have Russia Day, or not Russia Day, sorry, Victory Day in Russia, for example, how is the best way what is the most important thing to reflect upon, to be thinking about when this holiday is going on? Is it just about, is it just about the parade in Russia? Is it just about the fireworks in the US? Or are there other things that we should be thinking about as citizens too on occasions like this?
I don't know, because all the holidays, they've got a different history, and I think that each person has its own attitude to different holidays. For example, some of people like New Year holidays, some of them hate them. So I don't know what is important observing holidays. I don't know. I think that important is your feeling and your perception of the holidays.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. That's true. Denise, what about you? What do you think about when it comes to reflecting on these holidays? What do you think?
When I started in Moscow, I become a more misanthropic in point of holidays. So usually I try to visit some faraway place, or going to some parks, or even out of city, because it's really all people trying to concentrate on the central part of city, usually on holiday. It's only probably 1.5 exceptions. It's a Easter holiday, because near New Year, Moscow become beauty. Government trying to beautify city much. And also, last 2 years, the same tradition appears near the May holiday, near the 1st of May. So this holiday, May and New Year holiday, is a good point to walk in a city.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, you guys. Like, I think.
Sorry, and then one more point to my feeling, most trying to do some massive events. It's very contains a very big part of propaganda now. And it's not often comfortable to me to visit such celebration.
I see. Okay.
It's also, yes, important thing to me.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I don't know. I think with these big holidays, these national holidays, or countrywide holidays. I think it's interesting to look and to see how people feel about them, what people do, you know, what sort of support there is from local organizations, from countrywide organizations, how much of an identity, how much of a nationalism or patriotism or what have you, how much of it is there? Also, what do people, you know, care about? Is it just because it's a day off? Is there an opportunity to maybe think about the reason why this particular holiday is being celebrated? I don't know. I kind of like to analyze that from sort of maybe a more psychological standpoint, but I find it very, very interesting. And I find it interesting to compare to how people celebrate holidays in different countries and in different cultures, and, you know, what kind of support those holidays themselves have from the authorities. And I think that you guys, you know, Russia Day is a very interesting example because Elia, as you were saying, you know, Independence Day and what have you, and Denise, you were saying, no, it's not true. But it's one of those things, you know, it's a holiday that exists, but how much education has there been on why it exists? So again, it comes down to education. And when I went to school in America, we definitely learned about the 4th of July. We learned about the history behind it. I think that in the past, oh my goodness, what, almost 20 years since I've been out of school, that sort of education has gone away. That the children nowadays aren't learning those same things that I learned when I was a child. I think that in Russia, you've got children that are learning things a lot differently, for example, about Victory Day than they did before. It was always, you know, an event, but now I think that you see these shifts in trends in education. And I think that whenever we look at any sort of national holiday, it's interesting to simultaneously look at what kind of education there is surrounding that holiday in the country where it is observed. Okay, you guys, this has been a really interesting conversation. Do we have any ideas for our next meeting?
Oh, probably I have no fresh idea today.
Elliot, do you have any fresh ideas?
I don't know. It was so huge list in Denise's link.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of
So,
something that's maybe more relevant. Is there something interesting that's going on, or what do you think? News-wise, I don't know. Is there anything interesting going on?
maybe about music. Have we talked about music?
As I remember, no.
No? What kind of music we want to talk about?
Every.
Okay, music. Is there any interesting music news? I don't know.
Everything. I think music, like for example, we can talk about literature, and it means any literature. Maybe the same about music.
Yes.
Okay. Something about music. All right, that sounds good. So same place, same time, music next time, guys.
Okay, thank you very much.
Does that sound good? All right, I think we had a good discussion today. Music, yeah, we'll think like what components of music? Maybe the music industry, promoting music.
Maybe different genres in
Yeah, I
music.
think some mix of questions.
Okay.
Not to go deep in splitting of genres or evolution of music, but make
Just
some.
music. Okay.
Yes.
All right, that sounds good, you guys. That sounds good. Thank you all for being a part of Conversation Club today. I hope you have a good evening, and we will all come together next week.
Thank
Yes.
you.
All right, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.